Welcome to MidLIFE Matters, where we celebrate women's wisdom and wit. I'm Georgian Lussier, your host, and I'm delighted to introduce today's guest, Sherry Winston. Sherry is a jazz flutist who has played in major venues, including the Kennedy Center and the White House, and she has recently produced a cookbook that includes a CD that has some of her original music on it. So welcome, Sherry.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm delighted, and we're all going to learn a lot and be inspired, and I'm just happy we're together. So you perform as a flutist for a wide variety of events.
I do.
And if you could describe some of your career highlights as well as the more standard fare.
Well, what's interesting, I developed a newsletter because people would say, oh, I saw you at this big concert, so I know you couldn't possibly play at my wedding. And I said, why not? Oh, you wouldn't do something like that after playing, say, the Kennedy Center. And, it was just very odd for me to hear that people had me categorized. So we've done, my band and myself, some things as exotic and wonderful as the White House or the Kennedy Center. And then we've played in people's homes, too, for private events. We've done all sorts of corporate gigs where we might be playing for a dinner or a reception or someone's personal party. So it really varies so much. We might do a dinner for 2,500 people and then turn around and do a reception for 100 people. So it makes the career very exciting because you never know what's going to come up, and sometimes it keeps you on pins and needles too because you don't know what's coming or if it is coming.
Or when it's coming.
Right, exactly.
And as an independent musician, managing your career is not necessarily as glamorous as people might think because they see you in the performance mode, but there's a lot of behind the scenes that goes on.
Well, it was amazing to me. I work out at the Y every day, and some of the Y ladies said, oh, you're so lucky, you come here and then you go out to lunch with your girlfriend and then you practice all afternoon. And I said, really, is that my life? I didn't know that. And it's the projection of what people think I do, but it's really a meat and potatoes business. You have to be on the phone, you have to call people. I work with a yellow pad, and I make sure I have anywhere from 25 to 50 calls a day to generate business. I also have to do emails and send out email blasts so people will remember that I'm still alive and that I'm still performing. So it's more business than musicianship, really, because I think I spend 90% of my time trying to get work and 10% performing, if that much. So it's a very unequal balance, but people that don't do that don't work very much. They have to have what we call a day job. And I did that for many years before I could figure out this whole thing of how do you become a working musician. And once I figured that out, all I had to do was mimic my day in my office when I worked for record companies, which was a normal 10 to 6 day, or sometimes later than that if I had to go out with my artists. And that's how I have to conduct myself. I've got to be at my desk a certain time every day. I've got to make sure I have a certain amount of calls. And if I goof off and I don't make as many calls as I should, I'll feel it at the end of the month or the next month because I just won't generate the business.
And when do you practice?
After dinner. So my routine is I go to the gym in the morning. I come home, I have breakfast. I go straight to my desk, and I'm there basically for the rest of the day. I might take like a quick iced tea break or hot tea break, depending upon the season. If I get a little hungry during the day, I might grab an apple or something really light, come back upstairs, and I'm back on the phone. I'll look at my watch and I'll say, okay, I've got 2 more hours, and let's get with it, kiddo. I'll add up how many calls I've made. And today it's interesting, from when I first started over 25 years ago to where I am today, people no longer pick up their phones and really talk with you. So it's a challenge. How do you make 25 to 50 calls a day and maintain your sanity, number one? And number two, keep track of what you should be doing. So it's a very intense thing that you really have to pay attention to what's going on, how many gigs you have, if you need more, and really identify your people that you're going to call. So it's been interesting. But when people don't call you back and you get everyone's voicemail or someone's secretary's voicemail, what I have found is helpful now is to leave a specific message or what you're doing to let the person know you're not just sitting at home, or, by the way, I just played at the White House, or by the way, I have an interesting concert coming up, and, if it's in your area, I'd love for you to come. And you mention what it is, or I just did a TV show, whatever, but you leave them with something that they can have on their mind in relationship to you. Otherwise, it's a totally wasted call. Just to say, hi, this is Sherry Winston, sorry I didn't catch you, boom. That's not doing anything.
It's interesting you bring that up. I was at a women's conference today, and a big topic was how social media and technology has changed the way we communicate. And people are also morphing even away from emails to texts.
Exactly.
Which is such an informal, abbreviated, out of context kind of approach. As far as I've gotten texts from people, I'm not even sure who it is because they're not in my
address
contact.
Exactly.
And I've sent them and just used my first initial thinking the person would know who I was. Fortunately, it was personal, not professional. And he's like, oh, I didn't realize that was you. So that's really constantly changing, isn't it, in terms of how accessible people are to even engage.
Well, and we've really lost something because I still work with my Rolodex cards. And if I got you on the phone, I'd say, Georgian, how's your husband Bill? And, last time I called you, he wasn't feeling very well. Is he doing better? And I'd have all of these notes on my card, oh, Bill was going to be in a golf tournament. How did he do? Or you were going to go horseback riding. How was your first lesson? Or whatever it was, I'd have some little reference point of connecting you to me. And now there's none of that. So how do you connect with someone? How do you bridge that gap between I'm asking you to employ me to, gee, we know each other, and by the way, I was just in a golf tournament and I did terrible, and let me tell you about it. And all of a sudden you say, girl, listen, I can't even swing at the club properly. What is that all about? How, who do you go to help with your swing? And then if I give you the name of my instructor, all of a sudden we've got some kind of connection there. So when that is lost, you're really kind of groping in the dark about how do I connect with this person if they really don't know me. So that's a real problem for younger people coming up today that don't have the contacts, that haven't developed contacts over the years.
That's a big mountain to climb.
Oh, it is. I mean, it was big enough, then 20-something years ago to try to figure all of this out of why do people hire you or why don't they hire you? And when you realize that there are thousands of musicians everywhere, there's got to be some reason for a person to hire you other than you can pick up an instrument and play. They've got to really like you, and there's got to be a connection there. So it's very challenging. How do you do that? How do you make them like you when they don't even know you?
And competing for some of their time, which is more and more scarce for, I think, just about everyone.
It is. And even getting someone's secretary on the phone is like a major triumph when you get a real person.
Let's look at how you got to where you are today. After college, your first career was as a social worker. And you said, oh, I'm going to try something else, and you ended up at Columbia.
No, not Columbia first. I had a long progression before
well, tell us,
Well, I started out as a receptionist at Electra Asylum Records, and from there, I kind of volunteered to do any kind of job other than the receptionist job, in addition to it, I should say, that was there. And I kept volunteering, and after a while, I found that I had a lot of knowledge about college radio, about promotion, just listening to my boss and listening to other people. So when a job opening came up, I let them know that I was interested in it. And the interesting thing about the record industry is nobody teaches you how to do anything. You kind of learn, I won't say by osmosis, but by paying attention and listening to what other people are doing in terms of promoting a record. And that was like a wonderful period of my life of learning.
You had these jobs and you ended up as the national director, right, for promotions for jazz, and was that at Columbia?
Right, and I had a series of other record companies that I worked for in different positions, and finally got to even work for Clive Davis for a while, which was a couple of years, which was very interesting, and had my own business, because the record business is kind of like the film and the literary business. There's a lot of people that go out the door, you go out the door, you come back at another company, and there's a constant flux. There's not a lot of stability there. So one of the times that I was either downsized or just out and out fired, I decided to open up my own business promoting records independently. And that's like being a freelance musician. You never know where your next job is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
But you're always kind of juggling, trying to juggle 2 or 3 record companies, working for them on different projects. Or if you're not lucky, maybe one record company. So it was, I've been doing this for a while now as a person that's working for myself, which is a little unnerving, really. It is.
Yeah, I don't think you ever really get used to it entirely.
Well, you kind of know what's coming, but you don't necessarily like it, and I can look at my calendar over, say, even a 10-year period, and I can draw up a graph and say, okay, now I know April's going to be a bad month. It's been a bad month for the last 10 years. Why would it be different? But when it comes, you're like, oh my God, am I going to pay my mortgage? Am I going to pay the light bill? Am I going to do this? And even though you have money in the bank, that's the mentality that we kind of hold on to as a freelancer. Will I be able to cover all of this? And thank God, yes, you will, but a lot of effort has to go into it.
Now, the role you had with the artists at Columbia, does that type of role still exist in the form that it was? In terms of...
Well, record companies don't exist to the extent that they did.
Okay.
I haven't been inside of a record company for a long time, but there are not, first of all, as many record companies. And those that are there, I think, are kind of bare bone. So whether my position, well, someone has to promote records, but you might have to do that in marketing and maybe public relations and some other things. And I've been in smaller companies where I was like the go-to person. I did everything. And that was really a very great learning experience. And that's what's allowed me to have my business now, just from knowing how to promote myself, to know how to speak to people. And to know that it's not always just about you, it's about other people and what's happening in their lives. And I think that's a good lesson for anybody in any field, that it can't always be about you.
Absolutely.
How do you help someone else? How do I say, Georgian, there's a great opportunity for you, and I know this other station that's dying to have a hostess come in a couple of times a week, and you won't believe this salary, and all of a sudden your eyes get big, and it's like, what? Let me introduce you to this person. All of a sudden you're going to look at me a little differently, as opposed to the person that's always looking to get something from you. I want to give you something now. Here's a contact that I have. And again, that applies to any type of job that you might have or any job that you might want. You always have to look at the other person and say, what are their needs? Even if it's just help with someone's relatives, I've had a situation where both of my parents developed dementia. And I know that whole route of getting an attorney and what happens after that and protecting your assets and their assets and on and on and on. And I share that with people all the time. I tell them, look, make sure, and I'll just list it. I'll say, call me anytime and let me help you. When you get stuck, let me share some of my resources with you. And just as a good human being, people should do that. Not always that, oh, now they're going to do something for me in return, but just put it out there if you have knowledge about something that might help somebody else.
So the generosity of spirit and sincerely caring about other people.
It is, and it will come back to you. And I think people can read that, whether you're just a taker or if you're a genuine giver. And you're doing it with a good spirit. You're not always saying, okay, now you gave me that, or, I gave you that, now let me see what I can get from you. I mean, that's just a really bad attitude to have. So my whole career, I've tried to balance always doing something for someone else. And for years, whenever a client would hire me to do any type of event, I would always send them a thank you note. I'd send them a CD or something else. And I had clients that would hire me every year, and I would run out of a different CD, and then I'd have to start sending them some of my personal collection or a T-shirt or something, just to say thank you. You didn't have to hire me. You could have hired any number of musicians. So it's always important to acknowledge people and just thank them, and sometimes just a thank you card, which people don't send anymore, to say, that was really great of you. Thank you so much.
When you were fired. I know you said you've probably been fired a few times, as have I. Why do you characterize it as probably the best thing that ever happened to you?
Well, I could have stayed at a record company and waited for my pension and waited for Social Security and all of that and never really fulfilled what I truly wanted to do. I mean, the artists that I had at Columbia, and I had 32 artists, people like Wynton Marsalis, Branford Marsalis, Harry Connick Jr., Nancy Wilson, so many of the big names, Miles Davis in jazz, people would die to have a job like that. But I was always going to the concerts going, God, I wish I was on stage, or boy, what would it be like to be on stage with Grover Washington, which I actually wound up playing with Grover, or Ramsey Lewis, and I wound up opening up for him in a concert. What would that be like? So there was a lot of frustration there, and when I was fired, although I was very upset because I had a very big salary and the whole thing, expense account, and I was putting a lot of money away in the bank, which was very nice. When I got fired, I had to think, am I going to go and look for another record company job, which I could have gotten very easily, I had a great reputation, or at this age, and I won't say how old I was, but I was, up there. Yeah, I was in midlife, and it was like, do I want to try to live my dream? Do I have the courage and the strength to do that? I said, what can happen? If I fail, I'll go try to find a job. But the interesting thing was I had an apartment in the city on the East 80s, and I had bought my house already. So I had 2 different payments every month, plus lighting in both places, and heat, and this and the other thing, internet and phone service. And it was like, oh my God, can I do this? And I just prayed on it. And I said, I'm going to work as hard as I worked for the record companies for myself. And I have never missed doing that. I just get up every morning and I do what I have to do. There's no debate about, should I stay in bed today and just goof off? That's not an option.
No goofing off.
No. If I brush my teeth, I get up and I go to work. Simple as that.
You've received many honors and awards. Share some of the things that have meant the most to you.
Well, I'm always surprised when I get an award because I feel like I love what I do, and there's so many people that are so much better professionally than I am. So it's always a pleasure, regardless of how small or big the award is. But the one that sticks in my mind was the U.B. Blake Award, and it wasn't so much the name of the award. It was that Billy Taylor, Dr. Billy Taylor, selected me for the award. And when I got the call, it was like, Billy Taylor selected me. It was like, do you have the right person on the phone? I couldn't believe it. And what that led to was him inviting me to play at the Kennedy Center. And that was absolutely huge. I mean, I was scared out of my mind, but I was also very delighted because I'd never played at the Kennedy Center. It was quite an honor. And it was the Women in Jazz series, the Mary Lou Williams. So being next to other who I considered great artists and being presented by Billy Taylor, and he got up and spoke about me, was just totally mind-blowing. So that award meant a lot to me.
Let's switch a little to one of your more recent endeavors, which is the cookbook. Recent, but 20 years in the making.
It took a long time, and to your audience who is listening, that to me just tells me, and the message for everybody is never give up on your dreams and never give up on yourself. I went to the traditional publishing route with that. I got an agent and I got all the rejections from the publishers, and that kind of went on. And it was kind of wearing me down because at the same time I was getting record company rejections, for my CDs. So I wanted to make the next CD, so it was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I just put the book down, I put the manuscript down, and I said, maybe this isn't for me. One day, many years later, after making CDs and of course performing and doing all of these wonderful things for my career, I looked down and I saw the manuscript and I said to myself, you know what, you're a real idiot. You have spent nights till 2 o'clock in the morning working on this book. Every time you go on vacation, the book goes with you. You're sitting on the beach and you're on your computer and people walk by and they think you're totally out of your mind. what are you doing? You just going to give up on this? So I picked it up and I said, that's it. This is getting done. I'm going to stop seeking agents, stop seeking publishers. I'm going to do this myself. I had no idea how much it was going to cost me, but I got my team together, and I had no idea what editor I should use or who or even how to go about. But I started networking, and I was calling people that were in that industry and saying, who's the best person for this? You know, and I don't have a tremendous amount of money, but someone that's not going to totally kill me. And they recommended Lena Sherrod, who had been with Essence Magazine. And I actually went and talked to her. She has this beautiful brownstone in Harlem, 4 floors that are just, everything is magnificent, right out of Home and Garden. And we sat and we talked. She was a wonderful woman. And I just said, look, I don't want you changing my voice. This is very important to me because I have had editors work with me, and when I look at my manuscript, who wrote this? I didn't write this. That's not even the way I would say something. So leave my voice, correct my grammar. If my sequencing is off, and chapter 6 should be 4, and 4 should be 7, and 8 should be 2, feel free to, talk to me about it and we'll change it, because I've been working on it so long I probably can't see it anymore. So we understood the parameters of how we were going to work together. And then I hired my longtime photographer who had done all of my CDs, who went to school with me, John Petahughes. So he was on board, and I said, be loving and careful, don't charge me a lot of money. And he gave me his fee, and I agreed to that. And then there was a woman that I had been sailing with in the British Virgin Islands, Pam Rice, who I knew was a graphic artist. And she had worked on my 6th CD, the cover, and I love her work. And she did some collateral material for me, meaning promotional pieces and whatnot. Oh, I didn't bring one with me. But just lovely stuff. So I turned the book over to her. And between those 3 people, when that book came, finished, and it came, and I opened my garage, and the book started coming in the boxes, and I opened the book, and I looked down, and I just sat there, and my eyes were welling up, because the book is so beautiful. Everybody did their job, and the printer was just amazing. And I found him through contacts also, and I had talked to probably 10 to 15 printers before I picked King Printing. So the whole team came together, and everybody made me so proud to know that I had worked on that book with them. And that's what it amounts to. It's not a one-woman show. It's all of these people working together. And then all the musicians that had worked on For Love Is Only the CD, that was done prior to the book. And I thought about not putting music in a book at all, because I didn't want to spend upwards of $25,000 to do another CD. It just would have made the book too expensive. So I said, is there a CD that I have in existence right now that would fit perfectly with that? And I did, because I wanted a romantic CD. I wanted something that was very mellow, that if I was entertaining someone, the 2 of us could talk and have the music kind of under our conversation, not over it or competing with it. And turn the music down, and it's going to be just a nice background, what I call a lovely bed of sound.
And speaking of sound, when your early efforts to play the flute weren't so promising, what encouraged, or who encouraged you to stay with it?
Well, my parents were wonderful, and I don't know if they knew I had such a hard time in school with the flute, but I couldn't get a sound out of that thing to save my life, and I was the worst in the class. And because of my ego, I couldn't stand to be the worst at anything. So I asked the teacher if I could take the flute home, just borrow it, and practice it at home, just so I could learn how to get a sound out of it, because I couldn't get it in the classroom. And I liked the results that I got. I came back, I could blow into it, I could get a sound, and then I kept taking it home, and the other kids started falling behind me, and I kept kind of passing them. And I guess that was my whole career. That's kind of what happened. I've usually started out as, the end of the line. In high school, I remember there were like 12 to 15 flutists, and the music director made me last flute. And I was incensed. I said, "You've never heard me play. How are you making me last flute? Based on what? How did you do that?" And he couldn't answer me. So he said, "Well, if you're such a hot shot, you can challenge the person next to you and take their seat. If you're number 2 and they're number 1, you're 15th flute, but, you know." So I had to challenge that whole band section until I got to the first chair. I didn't get to be number 1 my first year, but I got to be number 2 in the first chair position. And it was like people make these determinations about your talent or your life or where you're going, or, "Oh, she's not capable of doing this," or "You can't do a book. You're too old to learn the piano." What do you mean you want to learn the piano now? What do you mean you want to go to Japan by yourself? Are you crazy? Do you know what happens to women that travel by I mean, all of these things that people tell us we can't do, and we can do them. But you've got to have something within you that makes you want to do these things. I don't think anybody can give you that. And I've tried to mentor kids that don't have that drive, and as much as I want to force it on them, I can't.
It has to be more intrinsic.
It does. You can help bring it out, but you can't give it to them.
Looking back, do you have a piece of advice you would give your younger self?
I would say it's going to happen. Just hang in there. Everything that you're doing is right. Don't doubt yourself so much. Don't think that you're the worst one in the class, even though that's how you started out. That's not how you're going to end up.
Nice. And I'd like to close with a quote that I read in your material, and it says, "Follow your dreams, no matter how foolish they may seem to others. Look upward and follow your heart. Look at me, I know I can fly." Sherry Winston, that is magnificent.
Thank you.
Very inspirational. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And please tune in to your other fascinating women on future segments of Midlife Matters. Georgian Lussier, your host. Thanks for